It's Wednesday in Simpsonville, South Carolina, and today I want to talk to you on the subject of the early church and the striking down of prejudice and partiality. I feel blessed because I pastored a church in Florida for 27 years that was a checkerboard of colors. We had black, we had yellow, we had red, we had every color that the nations have. And we all got along fabulously, and it wasn't just one or two, it was several of every color. And we had Hispanics and we had Anglos, and we just had a wonderful congregation. I'm fortunate because I was raised in a country that in the North was very tolerant of prejudice and allowed me to learn at an early age in school that different races could get along well with each other and be friends with each other and help one another. And I found that to be so true as I pastored that church in Florida for 27 years. Some of my best friends in that church were of different color skin than I have, and I'm thankful for them. I know I can always count on them as friends, and they will always be friends to me, and there's nothing I wouldn't do for them. So here we are in Acts chapter 10. And one of the things that happens when you want to overcome prejudice is what Peter was doing. In Acts chapter 10, verse 9, it says, Peter was praying. Peter was praying. You see, God can get a hold of your heart when you're praying. The second thing I want you to notice in verse 13, it says, God spoke to him. There's no better way to strike down prejudice and partiality than for God to speak to you about it. So we see him praying, we see God speaking to him about it, and Peter was honest. He didn't want to eat those unclean things on the sheet. As a matter of fact, it's so interesting that in verse 16 it says it happened 3 times. That shows you how stubborn Peter was about his partiality and his prejudice. But what God said to Peter was, don't consider anything unclean that I've considered clean. Nothing that I've cleansed to be considered unholy. And so we find that Peter finally learned his lesson. Maybe it took 3 times. Verse 28, he learned, and he knew that there was not supposed to be any partiality in God's work. And as a confirmation in Acts chapter 10, verses 44 through 45, the Holy Spirit fell on Jew and Gentile alike, and it was a confirmation for Peter. Well, what about Jesus' teaching? Let me tell you, you go back and examine. I just took one gospel today. I took the Gospel of Matthew. And in verse 5, the Beatitudes don't apply to any group. They don't exclude any group. They're for everybody. In Matthew chapter 8, you'll find that Jesus cleansed lepers. They were considered the most unclean of all of society in those days. You find that he didn't go out of it, that Jesus went out of his way to not go into the same mold that the Jews were in. He went right through Samaria and ministered to the Samaritans there. And Jesus was sensitive to everyone around him. As a matter of fact, it tells us in Acts chapter 9 and 10 about how he ate with sinners. Well, we're all sinners and fall short of the glory of God. I'm so glad he didn't leave out the sinners, because he wouldn't have had anybody to follow him. And then we find that Jesus' teaching was very, very clear on the matter. He says, as he's teaching, and they said his mother and brothers were outside, he said, my brothers and mothers and sisters are those that do my will. And you know, there's a lot of people of a lot of different color skins and a lot of different kinds of languages who do Jesus' will. And then I would tell you that as you look at the healings, there was no discrimination and no partiality in Jesus' healings. He healed everyone regardless of who they were, whether they were rich or poor, whether they were white or black, whether they were in between. It made no difference. And then I want to finally take you to Matthew 28:18, where Jesus came up and spoke to them, that is the apostles, and he says, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples, listen, of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you, and lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Go and make disciples of all of the nations. We're all his disciples. Regardless of what color our skin is, regardless of our wealth or our poverty, regardless of our heritage, regardless of the language we speak, if we follow and we obey him, we are his. And he shows no partiality. You remember John 3:16? It says, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. He didn't just die for white Caucasians. He died for all mankind that would believe and trust in him. There's no room in God's kingdom for those that are bigoted and prejudiced and show partiality, whether it's for wealth or whether it's for color of skin or for walk of life. God shows us clearly through Acts chapter 10 and all through his teachings in every gospel that he is not a respecter of persons. He just wants us to come to know him and enter into that personal relationship. Now watch out, here it comes. He says, they shall know you by your love for one another. Do you love your brother? Do you really? Have you killed some of that prejudice you were taught? The stereotypes you put on certain types of people? I hate discrimination and I hate reverse discrimination. You see, they're both wrong. And to hate a people just because of a few is a crazy thing. We need to be sure that we learn that Jesus loved everyone and he died for everyone. And that everyone that trusts in him and believes in him is one of his children, and they're brothers and sisters of yours and mine. That's your thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.